Cracks don't appear all at once. They grow in silence, in unanswered questions, in rare touches, until one day, even an anniversary becomes just another date lost in the blur of routine. She leaves in search of answers she won't find, and he stays behind in a house filled with echoes. Lies don't always arrive through betrayal. Sometimes they come through the quiet exhaustion of simply staying together. When the truth finally surfaces, there are no screams, no scenes. Just a soft, "Who is Theo?" and the world collapses in silence. Sometimes the end doesn't sound like a gunshot. Sometimes it comes as a whisper, arriving only when it no longer hurts. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So let's get started. Julian first saw Celeste at a fundraising event hosted by the company where he'd spent the better part of his professional life. These gatherings were nothing new to him, standard, predictable affairs. But something about that particular evening felt off-script. As he moved through familiar conversations about revenue goals and annual forecasts, his eyes kept drifting toward a woman coordinating the raffle prizes with a lightness that contrasted the room's usual formality. Celeste exuded a calm ease, her hair loosely tied back, her smile unforced. She wasn't performing, wasn't seeking attention, and yet Julian found himself intrigued. They spoke for the first time beside the coffee station. The interaction was casual and unremarkable, but a spark passed between them. Quiet, fleeting, undeniable. From then on, their encounters became more frequent. Conversation flowed without effort. Julian, who typically kept people at arm's length, noticed he felt oddly at ease around her. Celeste had a way of listening that felt genuine. She asked thoughtful questions and laughed with the familiarity of someone who'd known him for years. One night, after a quiet dinner, Celeste suggested a walk, no route in mind, no agenda. They meandered through the city, swapping childhood stories, past regrets, and half-forgotten aspirations. That walk marked a turning point. There was no declaration, but something shifted. Without realizing it, they had crossed into new territory. Time together became a norm. They didn't define their relationship, didn't need to. Their actions spoke clearly enough. They were becoming something more. Eventually, Celeste casually mentioned Julian should leave a set of clothes at her apartment. He understood what she meant. Before long, he was spending most nights there. Their weekends took on a different rhythm, visiting local galleries, hunting down hidden cafes, saying yes to impromptu adventures with her friends. Julian, who favored calm over crowds, adjusted willingly. Being with Celeste added color to his life, and he in turn offered her stability. Marriage didn't arrive with fanfare. It came as a shared realization, an unspoken agreement during a quiet dinner that they wanted to keep moving forward together. They planned a small ceremony with just close friends and family. Nothing extravagant, nothing performative. Married life unfolded naturally, mirroring the way their romance had started. Easy, honest, free from complication. Julian often handled breakfast. Celeste kept their finances running smoothly. They exchanged simple, meaningful gifts on birthdays. On regular nights, they curled up together to watch familiar shows. When life threw challenges their way, they supported each other without making a show of it. For a time, it seemed they had found a lasting rhythm, but under the surface, a quiet mismatch lingered. Celeste thrived on movement, stimulation, and social energy. Julian sought calm, predictability, and unscheduled time. At first, these differences were barely noticeable. Compromises came naturally. But as the years passed, those little adjustments began to wear thin. Julian began declining invitations. Celeste started going on trips with her friends instead of waiting for him. Their time together became more about logistics than connection. They were still functioning, but the emotional closeness had quietly begun to erode. Everything came to a head when Julian received the promotion he had been working toward for years. The new role, security chief at a different branch, meant greater authority, better pay, but longer hours and erratic shifts. Celeste supported him at first, proud of what he'd accomplished, but over time, her enthusiasm waned. She stopped asking how work was going. She steered clear of conversations about his schedule. She became distant. Julian, exhausted and preoccupied, didn't notice. Evenings turned into quiet dinners and early nights. He often left in the morning before she was awake, unaware that things were slipping. Then came the night Celeste walked into the room while he was buried in a report. She asked softly if he knew what day it was. Julian paused, blank. The date held no significance to him. Their anniversary had come and gone unnoticed. Celeste didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "It's fine," and walked away. That moment stayed with him. He replayed it over and over. But because she never brought it up again, he convinced himself it had passed. What he didn't realize was that her silence masked a deeper shift. Celeste had begun to pull away, detaching while everything still looked normal on the outside. Their weekends lost their meaning. Julian buried himself in work. Celeste spent more time out, chatting endlessly with friends or finding reasons to stay elsewhere. When Julian tried to reach for something deeper, she brushed it off. Too tired, too distracted. Eventually, he chalked it up to the natural ebb of a long relationship. Surely, it would pass. But he missed what was truly happening, the slow collapse of the emotional core they had built together. Everything on the surface seemed intact, but Celeste was already retreating. Her growing absence mirrored the quiet way she had once entered his life. Only now it marked the beginning of an ending. Then, one Thursday, she casually mentioned a weekend trip with Daphne, an old friend from college. Said she needed space, time to reset. Her voice held a different weight, but Julian didn't ask questions. They had always respected each other's independence. Celeste's need for solitude wasn't new. He just said, "Take care," and left it at that. With work deadlines looming, he didn't want to add friction. That night, while trying to open a file on the tablet, he noticed it was still unlocked. A messaging window had been left open. Julian wasn't the kind of man who snooped. But one name, Theo, stood out. Something about it made him stop cold. The conversation thread was recent. The emojis she'd used weren't ones Julian recognized from their usual chats. He glanced through a few messages, 3 or 4 at most, and that was all it took. The story Celeste had told about going away with Daphne was clearly a fabrication. Julian shut the app quickly, his breath catching, forcing himself to pause before making any impulsive decisions. The following morning, Julian lingered with the phone in hand before finally calling Daphne. When she answered, her voice sounded distant, like she wasn't entirely present. Julian didn't bother with small talk. He asked straight out, "Was Celeste with her?" The silence that followed was heavy, stretching longer than it should have. Daphne hesitated. When she finally spoke, her tone was cautious. She didn't want to get dragged into something, she said, wasn't sure what Celeste had told him, but she also couldn't bring herself to lie. Almost in a whisper, she admitted there had been no trip. Celeste hadn't been with her. Julian offered a quiet thank you, ended the call, and sat at the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the wall, as time passed unnoticed. That Sunday, Julian didn't reach out. No messages, no phone calls, not a single question. He just waited. When Celeste returned late that afternoon, the click of the lock echoed strangely, empty and cold. She came in like everything was fine, like she'd just come back from a relaxing weekend away. She carried shopping bags, her hair was freshly done, and there was a new fragrance lingering on her skin, one Julian had never smelled before. He let her unpack before asking, calmly, how her weekend had gone. Celeste spoke as though reciting a script. Lovely places, delicious meals, deep conversations. Julian sat quietly through it all. Then he asked in a soft voice, "Who is Theo?" The question hit the air like a blade. Celeste's face drained of color. She faltered, fumbling for a response. She tried brushing it off, said Theo was a co-worker, someone she'd gotten close to, but insisted it wasn't what he thought. Julian didn't flinch. He just looked at her, silently. Unable to hold his gaze, Celeste began to pace. Eventually, she settled on the couch, and her voice changed. She stopped pretending. She confessed that something had been missing for a long time. She said she'd felt disconnected, unseen, as though they'd both stopped trying. And then Theo had appeared. She called it unintentional, something she hadn't planned or wanted, but that she let happen anyway. Julian remained still. No shouting, no accusations, just an unyielding quiet. Every word she spoke was like another confirmation of what he had been too afraid to admit, that what they'd shared had been fading for far longer than he realized. Celeste spoke for nearly 20 minutes. She described how it had all begun with innocent conversations, then quick meetups after work. By the time she realized how deep in she was, the idea of walking away from the marriage didn't feel impossible anymore. Her voice was strangely steady. That night, Julian didn't join her in bed. He slept in the spare room. There were no confrontations, no false comforts. When morning came, Julian left a short note on the kitchen table before leaving the house. It read in his handwriting, "I'll begin the divorce process." Celeste found the message after she got up. She sat alone at the table and wept. But somewhere deep inside, she had already understood this was the natural result of choices made long before. The days that followed passed in a haunting stillness. Though they still lived under the same roof, barely a word passed between them. Julian began coming home later, moving through the house like a ghost. Celeste avoided conversations that might dig up what they'd both buried. When the divorce documents arrived, they both signed without delay, as if simply finalizing something long settled. There were no battles over who got what, no drawn-out arguments, just remnants of a shared life quietly spread across rooms. And even at the very end, Julian didn't feel anger. What settled over him was exhaustion, the kind that comes from trying too long to hold together something already broken. The happy memories brought no peace. Instead, they hurt, a stark reminder of what had faded. What stung the most wasn't the infidelity, but how quietly everything had unraveled. There had been no dramatic ending, no explosive fallout, only a slow decline hidden beneath everyday habits. And as Julian signed the final paper, something in him shifted. The real ending hadn't come when she walked away. It had started the moment she stopped truly being there, even while standing by his side. The legal process moved ahead with a mechanical efficiency. Julian approached each step with a surprising sense of calm, even earning respect from the attorneys for his composure. Celeste, by contrast, seemed unsteady, avoiding his eyes, sidestepping any emotional confrontation. Julian remained steady, shaped by a blend of grief and resolution. He wasn't chasing retribution. He just needed closure. In the final days before she moved out, Celeste packed quietly. She sorted her things, clothing, books, small mementos, with no ceremony. Each box she filled was like a final nail, proof that this chapter had truly ended. On the day she left, she stopped at the door, turned, and glanced back at him across the room. In a hushed voice, she said she hoped he'd be okay. Julian didn't respond. He just watched her go. Their silence, in the end, said more than any words could. After she was gone, Julian sat down on the couch and didn't move for hours. The emptiness in the house didn't feel sudden. It had been there all along. What others saw on the surface was merely a shadow of what had long weighed on Julian's heart. The following weeks unfolded like a slow unwinding of tension. He slipped back into his routine, threw himself into his job, and tried to mend the hollow space left behind by a life once intertwined with someone else. Julian wasn't searching for distractions or chasing new highs. He was in the painstaking process of rebuilding. Gradually, he adjusted to a new rhythm, one free of shared decisions about TV volume, dinner choices, or the endless events Celeste once scheduled. It felt like stepping back into a former version of himself, only now altered by unseen emotional scars. Then, one morning at the office as he nursed a cup of coffee, a message from his brother, Caleb, lit up his phone. It was brief. Saw Celeste today. She was with that guy. Pretty sure they're married. Julian stared at the message. His lips lifted faintly before he set the phone down. What might have crushed him just months ago now simply confirmed what he'd quietly suspected. Celeste hadn't just left their relationship. She'd already found somewhere else to belong before she walked away. Oddly, it didn't spark bitterness. Instead, a calm, uneasy but firm, settled over him. A quiet recognition that perhaps their story had been ending long before either of them acknowledged it. That weekend, Julian headed out to pick up a few items for his place. He was reorganizing his home office, trying to create a space that better fit who he was now. As he wandered through the aisles of a home goods store, he noticed a couple speaking softly near the curtain section. A second glance confirmed it. The faces were unmistakable. Celeste stood there, hair shorter and lighter, holding up fabric samples. Theo was beside her, their cart full of decorative pieces. Julian's first instinct was to turn away and disappear. But Celeste's eyes had already found his. Her expression shifted, surprise, then a gentle, wary smile. Theo looked over too, visibly tense but silent. Julian approached. He stopped at a comfortable distance, looked at Celeste, and simply said, "Hey." She nodded and returned the greeting. For a few seconds they stood like two people who had once known everything about each other and now barely shared a past. Theo remained quiet. Julian offered them his best wishes, said goodbye with quiet grace, and walked away. It felt definitive, as though the last page of a chapter had just been turned. Back in his apartment later that evening, Julian settled into his freshly organized workspace and opened an old box tucked away in the closet. Among scattered documents and forgotten notes, he discovered a small envelope. Inside was a letter from Celeste, written in the early days of their marriage. She wrote about her hopes, her fear of becoming lost in monotony, and ended with a line that stopped him cold. "If I ever change and can't say it out loud, I hope you'll understand before I walk away." Julian read the line again, then again. And it hit him. The clues had always been there. Celeste hadn't disappeared overnight. Her departure had begun in small, nearly invisible shifts, and Julian, clinging desperately to what they had chosen to overlook them. As he carefully returned the letter to its envelope, a deeper truth crystallized. The end of love doesn't always come with a slammed door or final words. It begins in quieter places. The silence that lingers too long, the warmth that fades into habit, the dishonesty easier to ignore than confront. And when life brings two former lovers face to face again, like it did in that store, the real surprise isn't seeing them with someone new. It's realizing there's no pain left. And that absence? That's the clearest evidence of healing. Life, without ceremony or fanfare, had moved forward. 2 years slipped by after that unexpected meeting. Julian's days unfolded peacefully. He focused on work, completed the full renovation of his apartment, took the occasional weekend trip, and reconnected with old friends. He dated casually, had meaningful conversations that lasted a few weeks, but nothing blossomed into permanence. He wasn't closing himself off, he just stopped forcing anything. He found fulfillment in quiet moments and strength in the healing of old wounds. Though he stayed open to what might come, he felt no urge to reopen the past. Then, one Tuesday morning, as he sifted through emails before heading out, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unsaved number, but the name attached to it stopped him cold. Celeste. Her message was short. She hoped it wasn't inappropriate, but wanted to talk. No pressure, just coffee. She suggested Friday at 4 p.m., downtown cafe, if he was open to it. Julian stared at the message for a long time. Then, after a steady breath, he responded with a simple, "Okay." That Friday, he arrived early and chose a seat by the window. The cafe hadn't changed much. Soon, Celeste stepped in. She looked different, less polished, more real. No dramatic makeup, no urgency in her movements. When she saw him, she smiled, a touch of nervousness in her eyes, and walked over. Julian stood, shook her hand, and they sat. Celeste ordered a milk coffee. Julian went with his usual espresso. At first, their conversation was light. Work, routines, bits of news that didn't carry much weight. But silence crept in before long, and it became clear she hadn't come just for small talk. Celeste confessed that her marriage to Theo had ended. In the beginning, she explained, it seemed right, but over time, she realized he was everything she thought she needed, and nothing she truly did. She admitted to feeling incomplete, to holding regrets she hadn't faced until recently. And then she said it. Julian had always been the love she couldn't replace. Julian listened in silence. He didn't stop her. He didn't rush to respond. Celeste's eyes shimmered as she confessed she hadn't come with the intention of reigniting anything. She simply needed to speak. She admitted he still crossed her thoughts often, that she missed their conversations, the small shared rituals. Even knowing it was probably far too late, she felt she couldn't leave it unsaid. She ended by clarifying she wasn't asking for anything to resume, just hoping to leave the possibility intact, in case he ever chose to return. Julian remained silent for a moment, allowing her words to settle in the space between them. When he finally replied, his tone was calm, his face composed. "Thank you for saying that, for being sincere. But what we had, it belongs to another time. Whatever we once were has slowly dissolved. I've moved on. And so have you, though in your own way." After a breath, he continued, "We carried something valuable from what we shared. But not all deep connections are built to last. Some arrive just to teach us something." Celeste didn't look away, her expression steady, though emotions stirred beneath the surface. Julian added, "I hope the best for you, I really do. But there isn't an us anymore. And that's okay. What matters is learning how to release what's gone." Without a scene, he signaled for the check, paid quietly, and stood to leave. Before turning, he met her eyes one last time, his words soft but resolute. "Be well." He stepped into the night without a backward glance. This time, the conclusion had been spoken, clearly and completely. No bitterness, no yearning, only truth. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.